Good afternoon. My name is Amit Chatterjee. I'm from Seattle, and happy to be here with you. The title of the discussion is "Who is really free?" And at lunchtime, I heard Phil Baba advertise for it. He said, "If you don't attend the talk, you'll lose your freedom." That's quite the contrary of what I had in mind. My tagline for this talk was to be, if you're not attending the talk, you are free. Real freedom is at 5 p.m. with Sri Guruji, but thank you for attending this sideshow. In a garden once, there were two rose flowers blooming on a plant. And these two flowers were talking to each other. The first flower looked at the second and said, "My sister, we are blooming and we are so beautiful. I have a wish. Today in the town, there's going to be a movie star who is going to be coming. And lots of people will go to that event. I want to go there as well. I want to have some fun." The other rose flower looked at the first one and said, "My sister, I too have a wish. I want to go to the temple today." The first flower says, "Look, life is so short. Nobody knows for how long we will be intact. Why not enjoy? What's there to go to a temple and lay at the feet of a stone statue? Let's go to the movie star function. Lots of people will come. The star, I'm sure, is going to perform, sing. People are going to have fun, and we will enjoy as well." The second flower says, "That is good, my sister. That's a good thought that you have. But my thinking, my philosophy is a little different. I want to go to the temple. People will come to the temple to feel the presence of the divine. They will bow at the feet of Lord Krishna, and they will also see me. And in me also, they will feel the divine joy." And you're talking about life being short. That is short. But what is the end? So the second flower continues. You'll go to the movie star function. You'll enjoy tonight. But tomorrow when the show is over, the sweeper will come, sweep you off the ground, and throw you into the garbage. Whereas when people come to the temple tomorrow, when the devotees go to the priests to seek his blessing, the priest will pick a flower from the foot of the statue and give it to them. And they will cherish that gift. They'll think of that as a gift of the divine. They'll keep it as a souvenir. Our life is pretty much like that. Most of us, we are in this world, we try to find out where is enjoyment that we can participate in. And sure, we find some avenues for enjoyment, but all of them ends with some kind of unhappiness when the joy that we were seeking for ends. And this is how usually our life goes on. There is pleasure, and then there is pain, and pleasure and pain, and pleasure and pain. And it's a cycle of pleasure and pain, and we are caught up in this sensual world, in this world of enjoyment. Who then really is free in this world? I'll share another story with you from the Mahabharata. And this was long after the battle of Mahabharata was over. You know the story, the Kauravas had won. And Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandavas, is the king. So he's sitting on his throne in his court. And Lord Krishna, who had gone back to Dwarka after the battle, he's coming to visit his cousins. Yudhishthira is on the throne, and Sri Krishna is walking into that court with a flute in his hand. And Yudhishthira looks at Krishna and says, "My brother, you have a flute in your hand. I know that you played the flute when you were in Vrindavan when you were young. But you left Vrindavan a long, long time ago. And Krishna was in Vrindavan for only 10 years, 8 months of his life. And Yudhishthira continues that after that, there was this big war of Mahabharata. And I know Arjuna, my brother, he didn't want to fight that battle, and you said something to him. And you restored his vigor, his perspective. And at that time, you blew a conch. If you see photos of Sri Krishna as Parthasarathi, Arjuna is on the chariot, Sri Krishna is the charioteer blowing a conch. And Yudhishthira says that that conch, when you blew that gave energy to Arjuna. It brought terror and fear in the heart of the enemies. That was a fitting instrument in your heart, in your hands. I don't think the flute suits you anymore in this adult life when so much has happened. You should throw the flute away. And Krishna smiles and looks at Yudhishthira and says, my brother, what you say is right. So this evening, let us go on a walk to the banks of Yamuna together, and I'll throw the flute away. So evening rolls around. Krishna and Yudhishthira are walking towards the Yamuna. And when Krishna was in Vrindavan, when he played the flute, the birds would stop flying and listen to him. The cows would stop grazing. The cowherd women would stop their work and approach him. And the poet says even the water of the Yamuna would stop, enchanting music. So this evening, Krishna and Yudhishthira are walking towards the Yamuna, and it's a beautiful scene. You can imagine the river is going by, the sun is setting, mellow light all across, the birds are chirping in the trees, and Yudhishthira and Krishna are walking together. And then suddenly Sri Krishna stops Yudhishthira and says, Yudhishthira, look over there. They're walking past a mango orchard. And on a mango tree, there is a big beehive. And from that beehive, it's so full of honey. Honey is dripping down from the hive. And under the hive is a man who's standing with his mouth open and drinking the honey as it falls off the hive. And Krishna says, how beautiful is God's creation. Honey in the hive, this man enjoying that honey. And Yudhishthira says, yes, indeed. And then Krishna says, Yudhishthira, look at his feet. And Yudhishthira looks down. And there's terror, fear in his heart. There's a big python trying to swallow the man up from his foot. And Yudhishthira, scared, looking at Krishna, says, my Lord, save him. He is going to perish today. And Krishna says, you are the king. Why don't you go and tell him to move away? So Yudhishthira goes and pats the man on the shoulder and says, just move away from here. There's a snake, a python, which is trying to swallow you up. This man doesn't even look at him. He continues to drink honey. And not even looking at Yudhishthira, he says, I know your play. You want me to get off this place so that you can drink honey. But that's not going to happen. I will continue to drink this honey. Yudhishthira comes back in frustration and tells Sri Krishna helplessly, do something, save him. And Krishna starts playing on the flute. And the birds in the tree stop chirping. The water of the Yamuna is still again. The snake slithers away from the man. The man stops drinking honey. And Krishna looks at Yudhishthira and says, do you still think I should throw the flute away? And Yudhishthira bows, folds his hand and says, no, my lord, forgive me. The flute is useful. Keep the flute. The flute of Krishna is the Bhagavad Gita. The word Gita literally means the song, divine song. The man represents all of us who are busy with sense enjoyment. Every moment of our life, we are busy enjoying. We do not realize a python is swallowing us up. What is that python? Time. Every moment, time is swallowing us up. Yesterday's child is today's adult and will be old tomorrow. And we don't realize that. We continue with a sense enjoyment. And this metaphorical story, it says, it is the song of the Gita which will make us free from this cycle of sense enjoyment and being devoured by time. So that is really the story. Since we are talking about this topic of who really is free, the Bhagavad Gita does really offer answers. We've been all listening to the words from the Gita. In chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita, the last 8 verses of chapter 5 are beautiful. It essentially tries to answer this question. Why try? It is God who is telling us about the secret of life. So he tells us who is really free. What do we need to gain that freedom? And what happens when you finally taste that freedom? So we will explore some of these verses because these were some of the verses that Sri Gurudev Paramahamsa Hariharanandaji was very fond of. He would often quote some of these verses. So one of the verses, it's not the main verse of our discussion, is in chapter 5, verse 21, where Lord really answers this question, who is free? And he says, we'll not chant this verse, we'll chant one of the later verses, but he says, Bahya sparsheshu asakta atma vindati yat sukham sa brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam asnute. And the literal translation means, those who are not attached to external sense pleasures realize divine bliss in the self. Being united with God through yoga, they experience unending happiness. Bahya sparsheshu asakta atma. Bahya means external objects. Sparsha means to touch. So we touch. This is a piece of paper, it's external. This is a microphone, it's external. Even my body is really external to me. We live in this world, and for us, everything in this world, apart from me, is external. And we, so to say, touch those objects through our eyes, through our ears, through our sense organs. So bahya sparsheshu, we are always engaged in interacting with objects. And here the Lord uses the word asakta atma, bahya sparsheshu asakta atma, the one who is not attached to external objects. Sa vindyati atmani sukham, that person realizes the bliss of the self within. Now we're talking about who is free in this world. It is still the world. Doesn't matter whether I am free or not, I have to live in this world. So everybody who lives in the world will have to interact with objects. So what does then not attached to objects mean? Our gurus say there are really two ways to experience objects. Either you interact with objects in ignorance, or you interact with knowledge. What does ignorance mean? This is the story of all of us. We see everything, all objects, as external to us. So we interact with that knowledge. That is separate. Whatever I interact with is separate from me, and I interact with that. And we know our teachers throughout the last few classes, they have talked about how we get attached to objects. We live our life with our senses, with our mind. Since our childhood, since previous births, we have these impressions, memories, experiences of interacting with objects that are strong in our mind. And all those impressions let us interact with objects either with a sense of liking or a sense of disliking. Both are attachment. Either we hate something or we like something. And then life is full of that. And we know what happens to that. We are fascinated with something, we chase after it, we get it. After a while, it does not feel that important to us anymore. And then we are after the next thing. So it is all one after the other. So what does the Lord mean when he says, Bahya sparseshu asakta atma? And the Gita says, our gurus explain that the people who are really free interact with the objects with knowledge. Yesterday, Sri Guruji was talking of a beautiful phrase. He said, those who practice eka tattva abhyasat. Eka tattva. He explained so beautifully yesterday. The one principle. What is that one principle? At least at an intellectual level, we know that all that we see in this world, everything that we see in this world, which has a name and a form, has an invisible presence as part of it that we do not see. But everything, a stone, a human being, a tree, an animal, an insect, has an invisible presence within it, which we say is that one principle, that divinity, which is within everybody. So what does interacting with objects with knowledge mean? Here, a person who is free will look at a flower just as we do. We get attached to a flower with its beauty. A wise man looks at the flower, and the first thought in their mind is, this flower is the beauty of God. That this flower is nothing but an expression of that divine which is within that flower. The flower is a name and a form, but it is the divinity shining through that beauty. When a thorn pricks our foot, even then the wise man would say, that too is the power of God. Yes, the thorn has pierced my foot. It does need to be taken out. But this is the play of God. Imagine a situation, we all get caught up with our own stories. We suffer with our own stories, or we relate to our story and enjoy us for a while. Imagine if we were somehow able to witness our story, our own story, as we would see a character in a movie. Yes, this story has a past to it. There are successes, there are failures, there's pain, there is joy, all of that in this story. But if you see it as a story being played out, then you might even appreciate that. You may feel the sorrow, you may feel the happiness, but you see that's a play of God. And I, that one principle, is really not this. It's a manifestation of me that is playing out this story. So that is what this verse says, that Bahya sparseshu asakta atma, the person who's really not attached to these objects, to likes and dislikes, vindati atmani sukham, forever in every experience, feels the joy of the soul. In every experience, that person feels that soul. It is nothing but a manifestation of the soul. And in that it rejoices. And that happiness, Lord Krishna says, is akshayam. Akshayam sukham is imperishable happiness. That happiness never goes away. So this really is the answer of in the Gita, which says that who is really free, and the Lord very clearly says the person who is free is the one who is not attached to external objects, but sees the presence of the self in each one of them. And that happiness that you see is imperishable. So that is the answer. But then how do we get to that state? We are all after that kind of happiness. But we fail to get there. The verses after verse 21 in chapter 5, they talk about that. But I'm not going to dwell on all of them. I'll just summarize. In verse 25, Sri Bhagavan talks about 4 phrases. He says, there are 4 things that need to happen before you can get to that state of being asakta, being unattached to objects. In verse 25, we will not study the verse in whole, but he talks about these 4 phrases. I'll share that with you. The first one he says, Shina Kalmasa. Shina Kalmasha. Impurities have to be thinned out. That is the first condition, the Lord says. And we'll go over some of these. The second one, he says, Chinna Dvedha. Doubts have to be wiped out. Third one, he says, Yata Atmana. The mind has to be disciplined. And the fourth, he says, Sarva Bhuta Hite Ratam. You have to be engaged in doing good to all living beings. It is not enough that you do good to your family members or your friends. You have to do good to all living beings. Without these four conditions, you will not get to the state of freedom. So these four again are Kshina Kalmasha. Impurities have to be thinned out or destroyed. Chinna Dvedha. Doubts have to be wiped out. Yata Atmana. Mind has to be disciplined. And Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. So the Lord is explaining very sequentially. He says quite clearly that only those who are not attached to objects are really free. They can enjoy the presence of the self within. And to get there, you have to wipe out impurities. You have to remove your doubts. You have to discipline your mind. And you have to be engaged in doing good to all living beings. Then the question is, okay, how do we do that? And this is where we will study a little bit of what the Gita says. And you know, it's interesting. If you think of our Kriya Yoga concepts, if you think mentally about the chakra diagram, right? There is the fontanelle, there is the Muladhara, there are the chakras within, in between. And really, the diagram essentially says that in this world, there are two polarities, there are two poles. At the top is God, and the rest is manifestation of God in all the other chakras. But when we forget God, our senses, our attention goes towards the lower chakras. That's when the senses are extroverted and we are engaged in sense pleasure, in interacting with objects without proper understanding. So what the wise do, they interiorize their mind, they raise their mind and the consciousness up towards God. And if you're able to get there, then our gurus say that then we will realize that everything in this world is that manifestation of that Brahman, right? So since we were talking about Kriya Yoga, it is interesting. Our gurus say that the entire Bhagavad Gita is nothing but a mystical explanation of Kriya Yoga. Everything in the Gita is nothing but Kriya Yoga. And Lahiri Mahasaya, who did the first metaphorical translation of the Gita, has essentially passed on that message through our gurus to all of us. And Lahiri Mahasaya himself had said, in Bengali he has a saying which says, Kriya Anushthan Bina Kam Krodh Dur Hoy Na. Kriya Anushthan Vyatit Kam Krodh Dur Hoy Na. Without the practice of the ceremony of Kriya, he uses the word Anushthan. Kriya Anushthan. Without the practice of the ceremony of Kriya, you cannot remove desire and anger from your mind. And anger and desire are just an example of couple of impurities. When Lord says, Kshina Kalmasha, all of these impurities we have to wipe out. Jealousy, anger, greed, lust, passion, all of that have to go. And Lahiri Mahasaya very clearly says, without practice of Kriya, you cannot get rid of these impurities. So in the Gita, in chapter 5, verse 27 and 28, is where the Lord explains the process of yoga. And you will see, when we study these verses, you will relate it to our practice. And you'll get conviction, this Gita is nothing but the practice of Kriya Yoga. These two verses, 27 and 28, they are nothing but an explanation of the technique of Kriya Yoga. Lord is saying that essentially you have to practice Kriya Yoga to fulfill those four conditions of thinning out your impurities, of banishing your doubts, of disciplining your mind, and in being engaged in the well-being of all living beings. Sparshan kritva bahir bahyan. If you rearrange these words, it essentially is bahyan sparshan bahir kritva. Bahyan sparshan, external objects, bahir kritva, move them out. A simple thought, we come to this hall of meditation. What do we do before we get into the hall of meditation? We leave our footwear outside. Yeah? Another way of thinking of what meditation is, before we get to meditation, for that hour of meditation, 90 minutes of meditation, can we leave our thoughts outside? Yeah? Bahyan sparshan bahir kritva. The Lord is saying, when you sit down for meditation, remove the thoughts of external objects from your mind. What do? We close our eyes so that we avoid distraction of seeing. We close our ears to not hear the external sound. We keep our tongue rolled up to not engage in taste or speaking, right? So the Gita says that the meditation is the key. The key to meditation is, the how to meditate is what Lord is describing. Bahyan sparshan bahir kritva. First, remove the thoughts of external objects, the objects of your senses from your mind. Then he says, chakshuhu chaivantare bhruvau. Chakshu is eye, bhruvau is the two brows, interior are your eyes between your two eyebrows. Now here's a mystical, in Sanskrit, the words have a case built into this. The word bhruvau means two eyebrows. That's what we have. But the Lord uses chakshuhu, not in plural, in singular. The Lord says, get your eye in between the two eyebrows. Now, which eye? If we have time, we'll talk about this. So we know how to meditate. Then it says, prana apano samakatva. Prana is exhalation. Apana is inhalation. Samau is balanced. Do it. Samau kritva. Get your exhalation and inhalation to be balanced, equal, slow. And then he says, nasa bhyantara charino. And so balanced that the breath just is moving inside your nostril, is not even coming out of your nostril. And this is what Hariharananda Baba would often talk about as slow, feeble breath. He would show that, put your hand under your nose, the breath is not coming out. That is the state of meditation, where the inhalation and exhalation is just happening within the nose. And how does that happen? We know our practice of Kriya through harmonizing our breath, slow, long, deep inhalation, slow, long, deep exhalation, doing our Kriya techniques. At one point, you get to the point where the breath is not flowing out anymore, right? That's when the sense objects are shut off. The eye is between the eyebrows. The breath is balanced. And then it says, yatendriya mano buddhi. Yata indriya, yata mano, yata buddhi. Yata means to discipline. The mind is disciplined. The intellect is disciplined. That is the state of the Muni who is looking for realization. Vigatecha bhayakrada. And that state, you will not have anger and jealousy and the impurities of the mind. And that is where you get to the freedom that you're looking for. Isn't it beautiful that these two verses of the Gita they describe the technique of Kriya Yoga as our gurus have taught us, right? So here quickly I'll say why Lord is talking about one eye. Lord has already said that shut off your sense organs to external objects. So our eyes are already closed. Then he's saying that one eye is the third eye. And you will notice that the third eye, if you have seen a picture of Mother Kali or Mother Durga with a third eye, the third eye is drawn vertically. Yeah? Our two eyes are horizontal. We look at the world through our two eyes. The third eye being vertical signifies we are looking up and down the spine. At the top is God. What is at the bottom?
Pleasures.
Also God. In that state of meditation, when you realize That is the third eye. The third eye does not see duality. The eyes which are horizontal sees duality. The third eye, which has tasted the mystery of this world when it has gone to the fontanelle, from there it sees everything as manifestation of God. Harirekam jagat, jagateva hari. God is this world. This world is nothing but God. Right? So this is what the Gita says, that if you practice. So now going back to what we were discussing up front, he says the person who is not attached to sense objects is free. Then it says to get to that you need four things. All the impurities have to go, all the doubts have to be banished, you have to discipline your mind, and you have to be engaged in the well-being of all. And then he says to do that you have to practice this technique. And this is what our gurus say. Keep practicing Kriya. All the impurities will go. The mind will be disciplined. All the doubts, you will realize who I am. And in that, you will realize that everybody is nothing but me. And that is how you become free. And I will close up with the last verse of chapter 5. Where the Lord actually says, what happens if once you practice this technique, how would you know me? The Lord says, if you practice this technique with love, with care, you will know me. And he describes in the last verse of chapter 5, verse 29, you will know me as three things. You will know me as bhoktaram yagya tapasam. You will know me as the enjoyer of all actions. We'll talk about this. Bhoktaram yagya tapasam. That is one way you will know me. The second way is you will know me as Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. You know our chakras, the seven chakras are seven lokas. We have Bhuloka, Bhuvaloka, Swaloka, Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, Satyaloka, or these seven. And you will know me as the Lord of all these planes of existence. Everything is in my control. Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. And the last one, he says, Suridam Sarva Bhutanam. You will know me as the friend of every living being. I'll touch upon this a little bit. So anyway, so this is what the Gita talks about, who is really free. We have to practice our Kriya Yoga technique sincerely. That is the essence of the entire Bhagavad Gita. And it is an assurance of Lahiri Mahasaya. It is an assurance of Bhagavan Shri Krishna, all of our gurus, that if you practice Kriya Yoga sincerely and faithfully, then all the impurities will go. You will discipline your mind. The doubts will vanish. And then you will be truly free. And you will know the Lord as the enjoyer of all actions. Whatever I am doing, it is really the Lord doing through me. He is the one. Isn't this Kri and Ya? That's what gurus say. I am the enjoyer of all actions. Think of me and engage in the world. Everything is coming to me. Bhoktaram yagya tapasam. Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. I am the Lord of all the universe. Suridam Sarva Bhutanam. I am the friend of all living beings. I'll end here. I'll just share with you just a personal contemplation, a thought which has been in my mind. You know, we are still on this journey. We are trying to get to that point where we feel that it is really the one presence which is the true Ekatattvam, which is the one principle that abides in all of us. That is quite powerful and I'm talking about utilizing that even when we haven't perhaps gotten that experience yet. Hopefully with the grace of God and Masters, all of us get to that state where it's an internal experience. No more a matter of listening to a talk. You know it internally, who you really are. But till then, at least intellectually, we all understand that there is that one consciousness which is manifested as all of us. And you can play with that. I'll share, we go through difficulties in life. And it is a normal human tendency when we are in a spot of bother that we feel, why me? I see my friends who are happy and who are enjoying. Why is it that I am facing this? Yeah, it's a common. And then these negative thoughts well up in your mind. That's where jealousy comes. That's where anger or frustration comes. Just think of that. In that moment, if you can think that it is really the one I which is in me as well as the others. Yes, that one I is in this role, perhaps suffering through some situation, but isn't the same principle enjoying through this other person? Am I not enjoying through that person? Let this person enjoy. It is me who is enjoying through that person. Yeah? It's a powerful tool. Whenever you're in a spot of bother, you see somebody who's enjoying. Think it is really you, your presence, who is enjoying that moment through that person. Enjoy with him or with her. You see a flower, you enjoy with that. So this is what I've learned from these verses of the Gita that I wanted to share with you. This is Kriya Yoga, and we feel fortunate that we have been brought to this fold of Kriya Yoga by our masters. This is nothing but what God has taught to Arjuna, and it is the same thing that is being taught to us over and over again. And it is time for us to put that into practice in whatever way we are capable of, till God takes us to that moment of freedom.